guys, Pat here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Hey, I'm here today and sitting in front of a little 1969 Volkswagen Bug. Inherited that from my father. Well, actually he gave it to me, months before he died. But it's not running right. So it wasn't running right when I got it from him because it had been sitting for quite a while. I was driving it, trying to fix it up before he gave it to me. And I was going to clean it up for him and get it all ready for him to drive around, and it wasn't running right. And so with that being said, I really didn't have the tools or the means to fix it. So I took it down to a place that specialized in Volkswagen Bugs, and $450 later, he'd done some brake work on it and the engine ran the same. So driving it home from that town to the town that Dad lived in, it stopped on me 3 times while going over the mountain. Luckily I had a place to pull off, or visibility was good to where I could get off the road, and after a short period of time it'd start up again. Well, I figured, well, maybe it's something to do with the fuel. I mean, 1969 Volkswagen Bug. It's had this original gas tank in it. Could be something going on there. Anyway, I got it home, and just recently I've been troubleshooting a little bit and said, well, you know what? I'm gonna drain all the fuel out of it, and I'm gonna take the gas tank out. I'm gonna start from the gas tank and work back, just to give me peace of mind. And there's a little filter in the bottom of these little fuel tanks, and it was tipped over and laying inside the gas tank. Well, I was thinking, well, maybe there's rust or something like that that's floating across the hole and impeding fuel flow every now and then. As far as I could tell, it was firing okay. It would run good and then it would just quit. So I suspected it was a fuel issue. So I took the tank out, cleaned it out. There was hardly any debris at all inside the tank, but there was a little bit of rust, chips floating around, but the tank was in really good shape. So I cleaned it out, rinsed it out, filled it back up with some fresh fuel, re-landed or reattached that little filter differently than when it, originally was, and I had to build a new seal for it on the bottom where the nut goes on the bottom side of that effluent filter. So there's that little candle filter in there, and then it goes out, and there's a little nut on the back side of the fuel tank that seals the tank, and then there's a barb adapter that runs out the bottom of that, and then you have fuel lines that go to the back of the car. Well, I got all that cleaned up, fixed up, checked my flow in the back. To me, it didn't flow really well. So I was thinking, well, maybe the line has some tubercles, or that's a water term for buildup of rust and whatnot like that in a water line. So I was thinking, well, maybe there's a restriction inside of the line itself. So after I reinstalled the fuel tank, I thought, well, I'll check the line between the fuel tank and where it comes into the engine compartment. It's starting to rain on me here. So I got the fuel line reconnected and went back to the back of the car and disconnected the line that runs to the little fuel pump. So obviously the line goes to the fuel pump, and from the fuel pump goes to the carburetor. And there's a couple little paper filters back there. And you guys might be wondering, why did you suspect it was the fuel pump in the first place? Well, that's a good question. What I had done to start with is I disconnected the line that actually goes into the carburetor. So basically what that did is what I was doing is I was testing from the tank through the pump into the carburetor, and I wasn't getting any fuel. So, okay, well, maybe it was a flow problem to the pump. Well, I didn't think that was the case because I took the tank out, made sure all that was clean and right and nothing was impeding the flow. And one of those ways that I was making that test or verifying that it was good from the tank to the back of the car to the fuel pump, I got some of this little cable. I don't know if it's 3/32 or 1/16 or I can't remember what it was, but it's just a little steel flexible cable. And I ran off about 10 feet, I think it was, enough to go from the back of the car clear to the fuel tank. And I cut that piece off and disconnected the line between the fuel pump and the line that starts going from the back of the car to the front of the car, or ends up at the back of the car, however you want to look at the flow, end of the line. Anyway, so I ran this cable up through the fuel line because I noticed at that connection there was a little bit of buildup on the inside of the fuel line itself. So I'm thinking, well, maybe there's a restriction in the line. So I don't want any restriction, because even if you do have flow back there, if you have a restriction in the line, it could be starving the carburetor from fuel. I mean, your fuel pump could be working right, but it's just not getting enough fuel on acceleration. So to hopefully rid myself of that question, I took 10 feet of this aircraft cable, I guess, and put it in a drill after I get it in after I could thread it in so far. Then if there's a bend in the line or anything like that, you know, want to make sure this is clean, obviously, but I wanted to make sure that it was all the way to the front. So I did take that measurement, and my best estimate was it was 10 feet. So I could thread this in there, and I knew, okay, well, I'm in there 3 feet. That's not enough. So I could twist this cable around and make it around a bend, or make it around between a flexible line and a hard line. And so I could finally get it around corners and different things. And I could also twist the drill, and that would also rotate the tip to where it would work around corners. So once I got this all the way to the front of the car, and I figured I was right there close to the end where the fuel line entered into the gas tank, I just took and I ran this just for several seconds. And what this cable does is that kind of acts like a sewer snake, and it slaps the inside of the fuel line, exercises that. If there's any buildup inside that line or any restriction, it should exercise that out of the line, or beat it into a smaller pieces. And then after that, obviously I pull this thing out, installed a receptacle back there at the line where it's disconnected. And so at the front of the car, I set up this little blower. This is just a little leaf blower. I just removed the filler cap, and then just started the leaf blower and set this over the hole and just let it idle. As the leaf blower was idling, it was actually applying a little bit of pressure into the tank, but not a whole lot. I didn't want to affect the integrity of the line. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to apply a little bit of pressure, so if you have a weak line or something like that, you're definitely going to be able to find it and then replace that whole thing if it needs to be replaced. So at the back of the car, here's where the line comes into the engine compartment. In order to test this line, I ran this into a little receptacle or a little jar. I started up the little blower in the front, and that was applying enough pressure to push the fuel back through this line into the engine compartment. I guess you could say that was acting like an artificial pump. What that did for me is that tested to see if I had a restriction between here and the gas tank. And so by doing that, that verified I had flow that ran into the little receptacle. So that verified the flow going to here. So the fuel tank was good. The lines were good coming to the fuel tank. So what I did is to verify that the fuel pump wasn't working. I hooked the line back up, and the inlet's on the top of these little pumps like this. I'm not going to put that all the way on because I'm just going to take it back off again because I'm going to replace this. So inlet's on the top. I hooked up everything and pulled this line off of where the fuel goes into the carburetor. So it goes in here and then out and then up through here to the carburetor. So I pulled this off, and so I went back to the ignition and cranked it for several seconds, and I still had no fuel coming out of here. So that told me that this little mechanical pump was not, the diaphragm or something like that is dried out or has a hole in it or something, and obviously wasn't working. I did pour a little bit of fuel in the carburetor. The car would fire for just a couple of seconds and die out when the fuel got burnt. And so I'm pretty sure that we're good at the carburetor. We're good at firing because it fired, obviously, and it ran for a few seconds. So I kind of ruled that out. Go ahead and reattach this. Line going to the carburetor. Now, I don't know why I'm using a screwdriver. It's a lot easier to use those little nut drivers like I got. It's a lot better, more of a solid contact. Don't slip off there as easy. So what that told me is that, you know what, I need to change this little fuel pump. So here we are. I ordered up a new fuel pump. And the thing about these little cars, they're not really that expensive. I mean, if you get the original equipment, people on eBay, they see you coming a mile away. And so if you really want original equipment, you're going to pay a little bit for it. But in order to change this out, I'm going to go ahead and take off the distributor. Give me a little more room to work in here. And to keep fuel from falling into where there's electrical spark, and I'll put this little plastic bag over top of this so we don't get any fuel to drip in here. I got Cody on the back side of me looking on here, giving me a hand. So I'm just going to pull this in out of the way. Put it above. There is fuel in the line, so I know the fuel. I know I got flow. So we're going to go ahead and take this out. Remove all these fuel lines. All meaning just two. Inlet and outlet. I'm going to take and pull this out of the way and raise it up so it's not dripping all over the inside of the engine compartment. Put those back out of the way over here. Now, believe it or not, this takes a 1/2 wrench. I'm sure there's a metric size to it, being this is a German vehicle. So anyways, there's two bolts, or two studs that run up through here that attach to the engine block, I guess. And then these two, I guess they're 12mm bolts that bolt this flange, this guy, down and in place. Take a look at the bottom of these things and make sure that they're the same animal. Measurements all look right.
Okay, that took me quite a while to do, but I want to make sure that I didn't scratch this. This is kind of like a Bakelite. It's not aluminum, it's some sort of a composite. But even if it was aluminum, I want to make sure that I don't scratch this surface, but I also want to make sure that I get that old gasket off of there. So I'm not sure if you guys can see that or not, but there's a little steel piston or rod that runs up through here and exercises the bottom of that pump when the engine's turning over. And they give me two gaskets. This gasket, which I don't think that little piston will run up through there. So what I can do is I can cut that bigger, or I can put this weaker gasket on there. Give that a try first, see if that works. And then obviously, the more gasket material or the thicker the gasket you put on there, you know, it's going to increase the distance. If you have a thicker gasket, it's going to increase the distance between here and the top of the rod. So I'm going to put a thinner gasket on there. They give me two gaskets. I'm going to put the one gasket on there. And it looks like it's about the same size as the gasket I took off. This does not rotate any, so hopefully that's going to miss everything that it needs to miss. Looks like it will. This little pump did not come with any screws, just two gaskets. So we'll reuse the old screws that really don't look that old at all. Try to tighten these bolts down at equal increments. I'm sure there's probably a torque value to these things, but I don't know what that is. Well, we'll hook our lines up before we put our distributor and our rotor back on. We put our outlet line in first because it's on the bottom. I think overall that would be easier to do. Seems easier anyway. And of course the inlet line. It's actually a pretty tight fit. I'm not sure if I would recommend this to anybody or not, because they don't give you a whole lot of room in here. You just need that pipe clamp over top of that little bulbous part that comes out. Preferably it's behind it. I see what I'm gonna have to do. Turn this over so the wide part of the clamp is on the bottom. That gives me more room, and I can still get on the tightening nut here. That's a lot better. Just like it belongs, huh? Okay, so we'll tighten these guys up. Make sure this one's tightened because I was messing with it. And now that all the gas lines are secure, I can put the rotor back on. Well, let's see. How's everything looking? Make sure everything is away from any of the hot stuff that comes in through here. Okay, the moment of truth. Let's see if this thing cranks over. Couple of visitors out there. One, he's looking at me pretty close. The furthest one, he's watching me good, and that's an apple tree that they're in right down there. Okay, now I think what I have is just older fuel in the carburetor. I might need to take the carburetor apart and clean it out. I actually did buy a new carburetor. It wasn't much money. May end up throwing that on there, but I think it just needs to work the old fuel out of the float bowl and just work that through. Well, anyway, hope you guys found this more helpful than confusing. Again, the car wouldn't even run before, but now it runs, so I know that fuel filter was bad. So I think I might need to do a little carburetor work or just let it run and clean itself up. Then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let it run for a little while, see how that performs, and then we're going to go from there. If not, we'll have to change out the carburetor, and I guess that'll be another video. Well, thanks for stopping by. Take care, and God bless.